The Orphans of North Carolina, too beautiful to be human, Edith and Flora were not what they seemed. In the mist-shrouded mountains of western North Carolina, where narrow valleys cut between ancient peaks and families lived in isolation for generations, secrets thrived in the shadows. It was 1912 when the truth about the Blackwood lineage emerged, a revelation that would shock even the most hardened residents of Caldwell County. The Blackwood family had settled in these remote hills in the 1830s, establishing themselves as one of the founding families of the region. Their sprawling farmstead sat nestled against the Blue Ridge, accessible only by a winding dirt road that became impassable during the harsh mountain winters. This isolation served them well, for it concealed what transpired behind closed doors. Dr. Thomas Miller, the county's only physician with formal training, first encountered the Blackwood sisters in April of 1912. He had been summoned to their home after their parents, Samuel and Eleanor Blackwood, perished in a house fire that consumed the east wing of their residence. The doctor expected to find two grieving young women. Instead, he discovered something that defied his medical understanding. They were identical in every way, Dr. Miller wrote in his journal, which was later found among his possessions after his own death in 1923. Not merely similar, as sisters often are, but perfect reflections of one another. Same height, same weight, same striking features that seemed almost too perfect to be natural. Their movements were synchronized as if they shared a single mind. Most disturbing was their beauty and naturally symmetrical faces, with complexions like porcelain and eyes of the most peculiar blue, almost luminescent in dim light. What Dr. Miller couldn't know then was that he was witnessing the culmination of 4 generations of calculated inbreeding, a family practice that began with the twins' great-grandfather, Josiah Blackwood. As the family story went, Josiah had become fixated on creating what he called the perfect bloodline, believing that by keeping the family genes pure, he could produce children of superior beauty and intelligence. The local authorities were mystified by the sisters. At 17 years old, they were both legally orphans, yet they refused to be separated or to leave their ancestral home. The county judge, a distant cousin of Samuel Blackwood, quietly arranged for them to remain under the guardianship of their elderly aunt, Martha Blackwood, who lived in a cottage on the family property. As Dr. Miller continued his visits to check on the sisters' well-being, he began to notice troubling signs. Despite their extraordinary beauty, both sisters suffered from a host of physical ailments. Their joints were hypermobile to the point of frequent dislocations. Their hearts raced at the slightest exertion. Most concerning to the doctor, both experienced episodes of confusion and seizures that would leave them bedridden for days. "I fear that what makes them so beautiful is also what condemns them," he wrote. "Nature does not forgive such manipulation of her laws." The residents of the nearby town of Lenoir whispered about the Blackwood sisters. Some claimed they were blessed by God with angelic beauty. Others, more suspicious, suggested darker origins for their uncanny appearance. The truth, as Dr. Miller would discover, was far more disturbing than any supernatural explanation. In the county records office, Miller found the marriage certificates that told the story. Samuel Blackwood had married his first cousin, Eleanor. Samuel's parents had been first cousins as well. And tracing back further, the doctor discovered that Josiah Blackwood had married his own half-sister, beginning the cycle of consanguinity that would eventually produce Edith and Flora. The genetic consequences were becoming apparent. Beyond their visible beauty lay a multitude of recessive disorders that had concentrated in the twins. Their perfect symmetry came at a devastating biological cost. Have you subscribed to this channel yet? If not, click the subscription button now to discover more hidden family histories that society wants to keep buried. Truth must be revealed, no matter how disturbing. The summer of 1912 brought scorching heat to the North Carolina mountains, unusual even for the season. Dr. Miller found himself making weekly visits to the Blackwood estate, drawn as much by scientific curiosity as by medical duty. Each visit revealed new layers to the tragic tale of Edith and Flora. "The sisters speak with perfect synchronicity," he noted in his journal. "When questioned separately, they give identical answers, as if reading from the same script. Their handwriting is indistinguishable, and tests of their knowledge yield the same results, down to the same errors. It is as if they share a single consciousness divided between two bodies." Martha Blackwood, their 72-year-old guardian, was failing in health herself. During one visit, while the twins were resting, she confided in Dr. Miller about the family's dark history. "My brother Josiah started it all," she whispered, her arthritic hands trembling. He became obsessed with the ancient royal families of Europe and their practice of marrying within the family to keep bloodlines pure. He forced his daughter to marry his son's first cousins they were, and when their children came of age, he encouraged them to do the same. 4 generations of this madness, doctor, and now these poor girls are paying the price for our family's sins. Martha showed the doctor family photographs dating back to the 1840s. The progression was clear with each generation. Certain features became more pronounced. The high cheekbones, the slender fingers, the distinctive blue eyes that seemed to capture light in an unnatural way. By the 4th generation and Flora, these features had reached an almost supernatural perfection. But Martha also revealed the graves behind the family orchard. 17 small markers, children who had not survived their first year, children born with deformities too severe to sustain life. The family's dark secret buried in shallow graves without proper ceremony. Samuel and Eleanor had 6 children before the twins, Martha said. None lived beyond their 3rd birthday. When the twins were born, so perfect and strong, they thought the experiment had succeeded at last. They didn't understand what was happening inside where we couldn't see. Dr. Miller began documenting the twins' medical conditions systematically. Both suffered from what he recognized as a form of hemophilia, their blood refusing to clot properly, leaving them covered in bruises from the slightest impact. Their spines showed subtle curvatures that would likely worsen with age. Their digestive systems were delicate, rejecting many foods and leaving them perpetually thin despite Martha's efforts to nourish them properly. Most concerning was their cognitive function. While they displayed remarkable memory and mathematical skills, they struggled with abstract reasoning and emotional comprehension. They could recite poetry they had heard only once but could not explain what the poems meant. They could solve complex equations but couldn't understand why the death of their parents should cause grief. It's as if their minds developed along certain channels at the expense of others, Dr. Miller wrote. Like a river diverted, carving deep in one direction while leaving other areas dry. The community began to take notice of Dr. Miller's frequent visits to the Blackwood estate. Rumors spread, morphing with each telling. Some suggested the doctor had fallen in love with one of the beautiful twins. Others whispered that he was conducting unholy experiments on the orphan girls, continuing what their family had started. Sheriff James Caldwell paid a visit to Miller's office in town, his weathered face stern with concern. "People are talking, Thomas," he said without preamble. "2 young girls alone with their aunt in that big house and you visiting near every week. It doesn't look right." Miller explained his medical concerns, carefully omitting the details of the family's inbreeding. The sheriff seemed satisfied but left with a warning. "Those mountains have kept secrets for generations, Doc. Some might be better left buried." But Miller could not let it rest. As a man of science at the dawn of the modern medical era, he felt compelled to document the case for posterity. He began corresponding with medical colleagues in Charlotte and even Baltimore, describing the twins' conditions while maintaining their anonymity. One colleague, Dr. William Hayes of Johns Hopkins, recognized the pattern immediately. "What you describe, my friend," he wrote back, "are the classic signs of extensive consanguinity. The combination of extraordinary beauty alongside serious physical and neurological deficits is textbook. I urge caution in your involvement, as such families often fiercely guard their secrets." As autumn approached, Dr. Miller made a discovery that would change everything. While examining Flora during one of her seizure episodes, he noticed unusual scarring on her abdomen. Unquestioned, Martha reluctantly revealed the truth. Both twins had undergone surgeries performed by their father 2 years earlier. Samuel Blackwood, though not formally trained, had studied medicine through books and correspondence, believing that his daughters represented the perfection of his family's bloodline. He had surgically removed their reproductive organs to prevent them from bearing children outside the family, while protecting them from what he considered the weakening effects of menstruation and childbearing. The horror of this revelation left Dr. Miller sleepless for days. The ethical and legal implications were overwhelming. Yet, with both parents dead and the procedures already performed years ago, what justice could he pursue? And what would become of the twins if this information became public? By late October 1912, the condition of the Blackwood twins had deteriorated significantly. Their seizures increased in frequency, sometimes occurring simultaneously, as if their neural connections transcended their separate bodies. Dr. Miller had begun staying overnight at the estate during these episodes, monitoring their vital signs and administering the limited medications available at the time. During one such night, while Flora slept fitfully under the influence of a sedative, Edith experienced a moment of unusual clarity. Her perfectly symmetrical face, illuminated by the oil lamp beside her bed, showed an awareness that Dr. Miller had not previously observed. "We are broken inside, aren't we, Doctor?" she asked, her voice barely above a whisper. Beautiful shells hiding ruined mechanisms. Startled by this self-awareness, Miller nodded. Your family's choices have affected your health, yes. But medical science is advancing rapidly. There may be treatments in the future. Edith's unnaturally blue eyes fixed on his. We remember everything, you know. Every conversation ever held in our presence, every book read to us, every pain inflicted. We remember our siblings who died. Father called them failures. The doctor recorded their conversation verbatim that night, noting that for the first time, Edith had spoken as an individual rather than in the unified voice she typically shared with Flora. It was the first crack in their synchronized existence. The next morning, Flora awoke with no memory of her sister's midnight conversation, but she displayed a new agitation, as if something fundamental had shifted between them. The sisters, previously inseparable, began to display subtle disagreements. When asked simple questions like their preference for tea or coffee, they would glance at each other uncertainly before answering, sometimes differently. I believe their neurological connection is weakening as their condition progresses, Dr. Miller wrote. While medically concerning, it may represent their first opportunity for individual identity. Aunt Martha viewed these changes with alarm. This isn't right, she told the doctor privately. They've always been of one mind since birth. When they speak differently, it means death is approaching. It happened with the others, too. The others Martha referred to were the twins, siblings who had not survived information she had been gradually revealing to Dr. Miller. According to Martha, Samuel and Eleanor Blackwood had produced 8 children before Edith and Flora. 6 had died in infancy with severe deformities. 2 a pair of twin boys had survived until age 7, displaying the same extraordinary beauty and synchronized behaviors as their sisters. When they began to develop independent thoughts and preferences, they rapidly declined, dying within days of each other from sudden cerebral hemorrhages. Dr. Miller was documenting a horrifying pattern of genetic deterioration masked by external perfection. The same genes that created their unearthly beauty and remarkable cognitive abilities carried deadly flaws that would ultimately claim their lives. As November brought the first snow to the mountains, Martha's health declined precipitously. Dr. Miller found himself caring for 3 patients, with limited resources and growing community suspicion. The local minister, Reverend Howard, began making inquiries about the twins, suggesting they should be placed in the state orphanage in Raleigh for proper Christian upbringing. The doctor knew such a move would be disastrous. The state institutions of 1912 were ill-equipped to handle complex medical cases, and the twins' unusual appearance and behavior would likely result in their being treated as curiosities at best, or locked away as mentally deficient at worst. If you've felt the shock and horror of this family's choices, leave a comment saying blood should never be crossed. This is the truth that must be spoken, the lesson that must be learned from this dark history. On November 17th, during a particularly heavy snowstorm that isolated the Blackwood estate from the town below, Martha Blackwood passed away in her sleep. Dr. Miller found himself the sole caretaker of the 17-year-old twins, with no legal authority but a profound moral responsibility. I cannot abandon them, he wrote, nor can I expose them to the cruel curiosity of the world. They are victims of a misguided experiment that began before their birth. Science and ethics demand that I document their case, but humanity requires that I protect them as best I can. The doctor made a difficult decision. Using his connections in the medical community, he arranged for the twins to be transported to a private sanitarium near Asheville, operated by a former colleague who specialized in neurological conditions. The facility, nestled in the mountains and catering to wealthy patients seeking discretion, would provide the specialized care the twins needed while shielding them from public scrutiny. To the townspeople of Lenoir, Dr. Miller announced that the Blackwood twins had been sent to live with distant relatives in Virginia following their aunt's death. Few questioned this explanation, as most were uncomfortable with the strange girls and relieved to have the unsettling Blackwood legacy removed from their community. The journey to Asheville, undertaken by covered wagon through snow-blocked mountain passes, nearly claimed Flora's life. The physical stress triggered a series of seizures so severe that Dr. Miller feared brain damage. By the time they reached the sanitarium, both sisters were in critical condition, their synchronized systems failing in tandem. Spring 1913 brought new growth to the mountains of western North Carolina, but within the walls of the Ridgeview Sanitarium outside Asheville, the Blackwood twins continued their slow decline. Dr. Miller had relocated to be near them, joining the staff of the facility to continue his documentation of their extraordinary case. By this time, the doctor had compiled extensive medical observations and begun corresponding with geneticists in Europe who were developing new theories about heredity. The emerging science of genetics was just beginning to understand the mechanisms that the Blackwood family had unwittingly manipulated through generations of inbreeding. Dr. Anton Weissmann, a German scientist who had read Miller's anonymous case study, wrote, "What you describe is the most extreme example of genetic concentration I have encountered. The beauty you mention is likely the result of homozygous expression of certain dominant traits, while the medical conditions represent the doubling of recessive defects. These sisters may be of immense scientific importance." The sanitarium's director, Dr. James Whitfield, had initially accepted the twins out of professional courtesy to Miller. However, as the unique nature of their condition became apparent, he too became invested in their case. The facility, which catered to wealthy patients with nervous conditions, kept the twins in a private wing, away from curious eyes. By April, the sisters' neurological connection had weakened further. They now spoke as individuals, though their thoughts and preferences remained remarkably similar. Their beauty, once otherworldly, had taken on a frail quality as their bodies struggled against the genetic damage inflicted by generations of consanguinity. Flora, always physically weaker than her sister, developed pneumonia that lingered for weeks despite the best available treatments. Edith remained physically stronger but suffered from increasingly frequent cognitive episodes where she would lose awareness of her surroundings, sometimes for hours at a time. During one such episode, Edith spoke clearly but in an archaic pattern that Dr. Miller recognized from his conversations with Martha about Josiah Blackwood, the twins' great-grandfather who had begun the family's inbreeding practice. "The bloodline must remain pure," she intoned, her voice deeper than normal. "Outsiders bring weakness. Only through unity can perfection be achieved, Doctor." Miller documented these episodes meticulously, noting that Edith appeared to be channeling phrases and ideas she had likely overheard as a child, stored in her remarkable memory, but only emerging now as her conscious control weakened. In May, an unexpected visitor arrived at Ridgeview. Dr. Elizabeth Carter, one of the few female physicians practicing in the South and a specialist in hereditary conditions from Johns Hopkins, had read Miller's correspondence with her colleagues and traveled to observe the twins firsthand. "What you have documented here goes beyond medical curiosity," she told Miller after examining the sisters. "This is evidence of the dangers of consanguinity more compelling than any theoretical argument. These girls' conditions should be made known to counter the eugenics movement's dangerous ideas." The eugenics movement, gaining popularity in American academic circles, advocated selective breeding to improve human genetic quality. Some proponents suggested that controlled inbreeding could concentrate desirable traits. The Blackwood case demonstrated the catastrophic flaws in this thinking. With Dr. Carter's encouragement, Miller began preparing a comprehensive medical paper, carefully anonymizing details while preserving the scientific observations. The paper would eventually become one of the most cited early works on the dangers of consanguinity, though the true identity of the Mountain Sisters case remained known only to the doctors directly involved. As summer approached, Flora's condition worsened. Her immune system, compromised by the genetic flaws of intensive inbreeding, could no longer fight off infections. Despite the best medical care available in 1913, she developed a high fever that her body couldn't regulate. On the night of June 17th, as a summer thunderstorm raged outside the sanitarium, Flora Blackwood passed away, her perfect features relaxed in final peace. Edith, in the bed beside her sisters, experienced a seizure at precisely the same moment, as if their connection transcended even death. When Edith regained consciousness the following morning, the doctors expected grief or confusion. Instead, she displayed an eerie calmness. "I am both of us now," she said simply. "Flora lives in me as I would have lived in her." Dr. Miller noted that Edith's manner of speaking had changed subtly, incorporating elements of Flora's speech patterns. The surviving twin now answered to either name and could recount memories that had been unique to her sister. Whether this represented a psychological coping mechanism or some more profound neurological phenomenon, the doctors couldn't determine with the scientific tools of 1913. Flora was buried in the small cemetery on the sanitarium grounds, her grave marked with a simple stone bearing only her initials, Dr. Miller feared that a full name might eventually lead curiosity seekers to the remaining twin if his medical paper gained wider attention. Through the summer and fall, Edith's physical condition stabilized somewhat, though she never regained robust health. Her mental state fluctuated between remarkable lucidity and periods of detachment where she would speak as if having conversations with her deceased sister, Dr. Carter, who had extended her stay at Ridgeview to continue studying the case, developed a theory. The twins' brains may have developed with unusual connective patterns due to their shared genetic makeup. With Flora's death, Edith's mind is attempting to maintain these connections internally, essentially preserving her sister's consciousness within her own. Winter returned to the North Carolina mountains, bringing with it the first anniversary of Dr. Miller's discovery of the Blackwood twins. The year had transformed everyone connected to the case for Dr. Miller. What began as medical curiosity had evolved into a profound re-examination of the ethical boundaries of both science and human reproduction. Edith Blackwood, sole survivor of her family's four-generation experiment, had physically stabilized but existed in a state between individual and dual consciousness. Some days she was clearly Edith, with distinct memories and preferences. Other days she embodied aspects of Flora or spoke as if she were both sisters simultaneously. The doctors had abandoned attempts to correct this fluid identity, recognizing it as her mind's adaptation to loss. By January 1914, word of the extraordinary case had spread through medical circles despite efforts at discretion. Dr. Miller's paper, Consanguinity and Neurological Development, Observations of a Mountain Case, had been published in a limited circulation medical journal under a pseudonym. The paper detailed the physical and neurological effects of multi-generational inbreeding without identifying the patients or location. The response from the medical community was divided. Some dismissed the findings as anecdotal or sensationalized. Others, particularly those working in isolated rural communities where cousin marriages occasionally occurred, recognized patterns they had observed in their own practices. Dr. Elizabeth Carter had returned to Johns Hopkins, but maintained regular correspondence with Miller. Your documentation of the Blackwood case has already prevented at least 3 consanguineous marriages among my patients, she wrote, when presented with potential consequences. Even the most determined couples reconsider. In February, an unexpected development occurred. A letter arrived at Ridgeview addressed to Dr. Miller from an attorney in Charlotte. The lawyer represented a distant branch of the Blackwood family who had separated from Josiah's line in the 1850s, reportedly due to disagreements over his unnatural familial practices. These relatives had learned of Edith's existence through county records and wished to offer her a home. After careful investigation to verify their legitimacy and intentions, Dr. Miller arranged a meeting. Howard Blackwood and his wife Margaret, both in their 40s with grown children, arrived at Ridgeview on a clear March day. Unlike the inbred line, they appeared as ordinary people, pleasant-looking but unremarkable in their features. "We can't undo what our ancestors began," Howard told Miller, "but we can offer Edith a family that understands her history," without repeating it. The meeting with Edith proved more complex than anticipated. She regarded her relatives with a mixture of curiosity and suspicion, alternating between speaking as herself and as Flora. When Howard explained their family connection, Edith's response chilled the room. "Grandfather Josiah said the outside branches were weakened," she recited in the formal cadence she used when channeling family memories. "Their children ordinary, their bloodline diluted." Margaret Blackwood, showing remarkable compassion, reached for Edith's hand. "Perhaps ordinary is healthier, dear. Look at us. We've lived good lives without seizures or surgeries." This simple statement penetrated where medical explanations had failed. Edith studied the couple closely, noting Howard's resemblance to family photographs she remembered, yet with none of the exaggerated features her immediate family had developed. "You carry the same name but look different," she observed. "We carry the same blood distantly," Howard corrected gently. "But blood isn't destiny, Edith. It's just one part of who we become." After consultation with Drs. Miller and Whitfield, arrangements were made for Edith to visit the Blackwood farm near Charlotte. The doctors agreed that continued isolation, while medically controlled, was preventing her from developing psychological independence. The transition proved difficult but ultimately beneficial. In the Blackwood farmhouse, surrounded by distant cousins who shared some familial features without the extremes of her immediate family, Edith began to understand what normal genetic variation looked like. The absence of the extraordinary beauty she was accustomed to initially disturbed her, but the equally notable absence of constant illness made a compelling case for genetic diversity. By summer 1914, Edith had relocated permanently to the Charlotte farm, though Dr. Miller visited monthly to continue his medical documentation. Her physical health improved modestly in the new environment, though the underlying genetic damage from generations of inbreeding could never be reversed. Her dual consciousness gradually resolved, with Flora's presence becoming less pronounced, though never entirely absent. The Blackwood family created a simple cover story. Edith was a niece orphaned by tragedy, sent to live with her closest relatives. In rural North Carolina of 1914, such arrangements were common enough to avoid scrutiny. The family kept her away from community gatherings where her unusual beauty might provoke uncomfortable questions. In August, as Europe descended into the chaos of World War I, Dr. Miller made his final formal documentation of the Blackwood case. Edith, now 18, had requested that her medical observations be concluded. "I wish to live whatever life remains to me as a person, not a case study," she told him. Miller respected her wishes, though he continued visiting as a family friend and physician. His paper had circulated internationally by then, influencing early genetic counseling practices without ever revealing the true identity of the mountain sisters. Edith Blackwood lived until 1926, reaching the age of 31 before her heart, structurally weakened by the genetic flaws of consanguinity, finally failed. In her final years, she worked with Dr. Miller to create an educational trust using the remaining Blackwood estate funds. The trust, established anonymously, provided medical education about the dangers of consanguineous relationships to doctors working in isolated rural communities. The original Blackwood homestead in Caldwell County was eventually reclaimed by the forest, its location fading from local memory. County records of the family's marriages were sealed by judicial order in 1920, after Dr. Miller persuaded authorities of the potential harm in allowing the full details to become public knowledge. Yet the scientific understanding gained from the Blackwood case lived on, informing genetic counseling practices and consanguinity laws throughout the 20th century. The perfect, unnatural beauty of the twins, achieved through generations of calculated inbreeding, served as a powerful warning that nature's laws cannot be circumvented without devastating consequences. In his final journal entry about the case, written after Edith's funeral, Dr. Miller reflected, "Beauty purchased at such a price is not beauty at all, but vanity's cruelest trick." The Blackwood experiment ended, as all such human arrogance must, with suffering that far outweighed any perceived advantage. May their story, though known to few, prevent similar suffering in the future. The grave markers of the Blackwood family, scattered across western North Carolina, stand as silent monuments to the dangers of manipulating human genetics without understanding the profound complexity of our biological inheritance. Their story reminds us that true human flourishing comes not from genetic purity, but from the rich diversity that has sustained our species since its beginnings. If you've watched until here, it's because you appreciated this important historical account. Leave a comment saying, "I watched until here," so I can get to know you and understand who truly values these educational stories on our channel. Don't forget to subscribe, like, and share this video with others who need to learn about these dark historical truths that still have relevance today.